Hello, my name is Felicia Blow. I serve as Associate Vice President for Development and Director of Hampton's Dream No Small Dreams 2 comprehensive campaign. Today's Thoughtful Tuesday program will be about endowments, what they are, how they work, and why they are so critical to the long term success and efficacy of our beloved HBCUs. You'll hear from national financial and investment leaders, many of whom are HBCU alum, on all of these different factors and features. This is an important conversation. You don't want to miss it, so let's get started. I think we're going to have a very robust conversation. My name is Felicia Blow, and I'll serve as your program moderator. Tonight's program focuses on HBCU alumni, and we will discuss the very important topic of endowment building. In order to get us started, however, we want to level set and really provide some important information as part of our discussion. So I'm going to share my screen and we're going to together review a PowerPoint presentation. This PowerPoint presentation is intended to provide answers to several key questions on endowment giving. So first off, we thought we want to level set on what an endowment is. We don't want to make anyone feel as if we're talking down, but it's important to level set. So an endowment essentially is a pool of funds that is set aside, and the corpus or the funds that have been contributed are never touched. And the earnings, the investment earnings on those funds provide the undergirding for a number of other activities at an academic institution. That's a high level way of describing it. That's why we have these 4 experts who are going to go in even deeper, but we want to level set. The other thing I will mention is if you're interested in these slides, email me at felicia.blow@HamptonYOU.edu, and I'll email them to you. So why is there such a thing as an endowment? This is a bit of an eye chart, and again, I certainly can email, but try to hone in on the very first bullet. Our academic institutions are built to serve students. African American students, in many respects, are some of the students that have the greatest difficulty in underwriting their educations. So one of the key functions of a university endowment is to allow for financial aid and support to be provided for students. And that the part that's underlined, the bigger a school's endowment, the more it can spend on attracting highly qualified students. I'm admitting, forgive me. Also, that second bullet, I'm not going to go through all of them, but these are the 2 that I wanted to highlight. A well-funded endowment will allow a higher level or quality of service at a lower price than otherwise would be possible. Now, this is no way the cost of a academic tuition anywhere, but say the real cost of a tuition for a student is $50. A well-funded endowment may be able to cut that cost dramatically so that the posted rate is no more than $35 or $30. Again, that's not how, that's far, not at all what tuitions are, but certainly gives you an idea of what a well-funded endowment will do. Let me admit this participant. Just moving on. My screen seems to be. At Hampton, we have a number of opportunities for endowments and namings. They are here on the screen. This is not a pitch, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time going over them, but it's definitely something that we want you to be aware of. They're not out of reach for most folks if your intention is to start an endowment. This slide, everybody, and Lo or some of the others, I hope you guys talk about this during the course of the program. Granted, the majority of America had 400 years or so of free labor. So when you see the bottom part of the screen, that's where that free labor came in. It built some amazing, well-funded endowments. The bottom part of the screen essentially represents the top 10 predominantly white institutions and the amounts of their endowment funds. Harvard, Yale, you can imagine. I was a little stunned to see University of Texas and then Texas A&M, but comparatively, the top set of bars describe HBCU endowments. Nothing to sneeze at. 689 million, and Hampton, of course, is in the top 3, but 689 million is a drop in the bucket. I hate to say it that way, as compared to the other PWIs. So based on that, the concluding thoughts are this. The wealth gap between African Americans and whites is growing. Education, everyone says, is the key to correcting this challenge. And how do we do that? HBCUs. We believe HBCUs are the linchpin to overcoming this educational gap. But HBCUs need support, and endowment support is where that support, endowment investment is where that support is most needed. So I don't think I have any others in the waiting room, but we have a pretty big full house. So why don't we just jump right in? Low, my friend Low Tony up there, the guy with Plexco Capital behind his name, you're the first up. Tell us what you do and why you think endowment giving is so important.
Sure, and when we say what I do, that's professional.
Oh, yeah. Yes, please.
I would actually prefer the personal side, but we can go with the professional side. So Plexco Capital is an institutional investor that allocates capital globally to the startup ecosystem. It was born inside of Google Ventures, where I was a partner, and we were looking for ways to get access to more deal flow. Came up with a thesis around Black leaders of venture funds having an indirect path into that industry, and therefore having really unique networks and a different lens to evaluate opportunities. So we started to invest at Google Ventures as a limited partner, who are the folks that invest in venture funds. I said, hey, that might be an opportunity to scale up that model, and incubated Plexco Capital inside of Google Ventures and spun it out in 2018 in the spring. And pleased to say that in addition to the holding company of Google, which is Alphabet, Intel Capital, Cisco Investments, the Royal Bank of Canada, and the Ford Foundation, I'm most proud that we have Hampton University as one of our investors as well. So we're a $42.5 million vehicle investing into venture funds led by Black leaders, other people of color, and females. And then we also invest directly into startups. We don't have a mandate on the startup side, but we have 17 investments into companies, and all except 2 are led by a woman or a person of color.
Excellent, excellent. Thank you, Lo. And he's going to dig into that a little more. Keon, will you introduce yourself to us?
Sure. Good evening, everybody. My name's Keon Holmes. I work with Cambridge Associates. Cambridge is the advisor to Hampton's endowment. I've had the privilege of working with Hampton for about 3 or 4 years now. What we do at Cambridge is advise large-scale investors, endowments, foundations, family offices, governments, and pension plans on how to manage their wealth, how to allocate their capital. And in that process, we also do a lot of research, a number of research on various investments across different asset classes, including investment managers like Lo Tony. And I met Lo in the process of doing research. How do we meet, Lo? Who introduced us? Oh, I remember.
Someone internal at Cambridge, or Dr. Harvey.
Yeah. Anyway, yes, we connected.
Always a good introduction.
Good introduction, for sure. And so, so I was fortunate enough to meet. And I've met with many investors over the years, and some of them are on this call as well. So thank you for joining the call. I'm not going to call you out right now,
but it's coming, right?
But it's coming.
Yeah.
But anyway, that's my background.
Very good. I told them that I'd rather them introduce themselves to you as opposed to me reading some long resume. They can break it down better. So, but Craig,
Yes,
welcome.
yes.
We have inducted Craig into HBCU-dom because
Right,
he's the only one of the panelists who didn't go to an HBCU.
right. But I have a, let's see, I have a nephew that went to Morehouse,
Uh-oh.
and who else? Somebody else went somewhere. But I'm an honorary HBCU member, and I've drank the Kool-Aid, and I believe in the cause. So count me in. But Craig Fowler, managing director with HarborVest Partners, headquartered in Boston. It's a $70 billion global private equity platform. We do fund investing, secondary investing, and direct co-investments. But I work mainly on the primary team doing fund investments, and even more specifically, have a target or focus of investing in emerging and diverse managers. That's something that my team has been doing for about 25 years now. And what we do for clients like New York State Common, large public pension funds, CalPERS, CalSTRS, and others, is basically find, source, evaluate, vet smaller managers for them that they don't have the capacity to do internally, in order to find that next generation of successful, diverse, and emerging managers that they can graduate into their core private equity portfolios. So again, great, glad to be able to do the kind of targeted investing that I'm doing. It makes investing in private equity meaningful, because it addresses, the need to help create wealth in diverse communities. We have a number of different mandates that we manage, but it's primarily focused on getting the hands into the diverse managers, ethnic minority and women-owned fund managers that typically have broader and better networks with diverse entrepreneurs. So it's really trying to get that capital into the hands of diverse entrepreneurs ultimately, and giving them an opportunity, to start their businesses, to grow their businesses, to acquire other businesses. So that's what I do with HarborVest.
That is really fascinating. And Michael, you get to round out the discussion. Thank you. His video is here. Yay.
Hi, can you hear me okay?
Yes, I can hear you perfectly.
Well, thank you, everyone. My name is Michael Owens. I am a proud HBCU advocate all day. I went to Hampton University, so I'm so happy to, be on the call with a HU hosted event. I'm class of 2000, so, it's just a pleasure to be here, especially among this great panel. Currently, I'm a managing director at Columbia University. I work for their investment management company, and, with the investment management company, we are responsible for investing Columbia's endowment. So this conversation is, a great one to have for me. I'm happy to be here. I really wanted to be a part of this call because I do believe that giving rates are really an indication of, how you feel about your university. And I know that, as far as, people that I know that I speak to from HBCUs, there's a lot of love for our schools. And, I just think that this is an excellent, conversation to have to make sure that, because I do think there's people out there that love their schools, but may not be giving yet and may not understand, the inner workings of an endowment. So I'm super excited to be here today so that we can have this discussion and hopefully raise awareness on why it's so important.
Thank you for saying that, because I do think there are some misnomers and misunderstanding around giving, what happens to, what is an endowment, what happens to the money, how individual investors or donors to institution, how it benefits. So this is an important conversation. So let's dive right in, starting with you, Lo. Lo, Tony, I can't remember what year you graduated from Hampton, but
89.
89. So I'm 88. So I always say I'm in the dark ages. I won't say you're in the dark ages, but you made a choice recently to make a what I call a transformational decision about investing in your HBCU. First, describe it, what you did, and then tell us why you did it. We want to hear that.
Sure. So what I decided to do, pretty much, you can think about Plexo Capital as more of a startup than an investment firm, in the sense that we're still building it out. We've just now started to expand our team, and we're thinking about the plan for the future and building our franchise. And everything that I've done to date has really gone into our firm. But I wanted to make a commitment to give back to Hampton, because I feel that it was so instrumental in my success. The ability to be around so many other Black students, people that look like me, and have the ability to be able to get into roles and leaderships and positions and groups that I suspect would not have been available to me had I gone to, one of the Cal schools or one of the Ivy League schools. So to me, it was an important decision to be able to give back. And I decided to tie it to the success of our firm by donating a percentage of our profits moving forward. So it's a way for me to pay it forward, to borrow a term that we use here in Silicon Valley, in that the money's not there today, but it'll compound over time. The more successful our firm is, the more we'll be able to give back. So we got a little creative. Right? Pardon?
It's like a pledge.
Correct. That's correct. And so, I just believe that when I look at some of the stats and the data, you've got the HBCUs might only make up, 10, 15% of the bachelor degrees earned. But when you look at the output, 25%, and Felicia, these are a lot of your stats, 25% of the Black STEM degree holders, their undergrad is from an HBCU. 21% of the Black MBAs have an HBCU degree. 50% of lawyers, 80% of judges. These are some of my stats now, Felicia.
Okay.
3% of the VCs are Black, and kind of when you start to look at those Black VCs, more than a quarter of them went to an HBCU. So clearly, we punch way above our weight class. That said, the challenge is that we need to make sure that we can ensure these entities live on over time. When I think about an institution like Yale, which probably has around 30 billion or so in their endowment, like if you think about that number, and they returned about 5.7% in either 2018 or 2019, that means that they returned about, if you take that math and then you look at the amount of the top HBCUs that were in your slide, so they probably returned in 1 year about $1.5 billion. So that was their gain on their endowments investment. And then when you look at those HBCUs, Felicia, I was doing some quick math while those were up there. The total number of the HBCUs in your presentation for their endowments is 2.3 billion. So think about that. Yale in 1 year almost made as much money as the top HBCU endowments combined. And so I always like to say that, those entities like Yale, they could have mediocre performance of their asset managers, or really they could have zero, like it could just be flat. And yet those entities will likely live on in perpetuity or until the end of time. And yet their donor base is still making donations to those institutions. That's right. So we need to somehow figure out how we can change the paradigm in increasing the amount of capital that goes to HBCUs.
Well, that's what I'm going to ask Keon. Keon, Cambridge has been around for what, since 1965? And they managed 73. Okay, a lot of money, and the fact that this is an interesting conversation, people are still coming in. So I want to put this in reach of the people in the Zoom meeting. So can you bring it down? Not all of us are Bill Gates. None of us are Bill Gates, unless we're really lucky. That would be awesome. None of us are Jeff Bezos. So help a lay person understand how this is even important to them, how this is an attainable strategy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so let me just talk about, again, you mentioned it earlier, Felicia, but what are endowments and what purpose do they serve? I think of them as a big savings account or a big wealth pool for any institution. And it really gives the institution, the university, flexibility about their day-to-day operations. So you're not as dependent on one source of revenue when you have a big wealth pool, right, that you can live off of or have a percentage of your annual need to support. It gives you more flexibility to invest in financial aid for students. It gives you ability to invest in new programs, and it's just an overall source of financial strength. And then, so a lot of the, I think the points that Blow is making is important to put into context why our endowments are so small. I mean, obviously, we talk a lot about these days the structural, systematic racism we've had, and we live in a capitalist society. You got to have access to capital to actually build wealth. And for so long, we have been shut out of that. And so, a lot of part of the endowments that Yale has been giving, people that have gotten wealthy and been able to give back to dear old Yale, so that they can send their daughters and sons there as well. And so I think it's important to know that. So, and then, we talked about the wealth gap. If you don't have the wealth, you're not going to be giving back to anywhere. So, and I think, we have to be aware that that's a big part of the gap, and that's an argument.
I want to challenge that point of view for a quick second. And Mike, this may be somewhere where you can jump in as well. When Barack Obama ran his first campaign for president in 2008, was it 2010? Small donors were the key to his success. And it's almost like this Bernie Sanders mentality where you get everybody giving some small amount in order to make a big difference. What's your thought on that? Recognizing that there is a huge wealth gap. Yes, there is, and that's not going to be overcome in a year or even 10 years. But we can't let things keep going on the way they are. So I want to challenge you to give me some hope in that regard.
Without a doubt, and I'll let Mike pick it up on it. But it's not at all hard to give to endowments. It's actually easier. Lots of ways to do it. You can give to Hampton's endowment, at a lower level. Usually endowments require a minimum amount for administrative fees. I think Felicia, Hampton's is $25,000. There's, once you have that, it's in perpetuity invested in the endowment. You can put restrictions on it or not, but somewhere between 4 to 5% of that money is going to be distributed each year to support Hampton. And, you can obviously give, write a check for that amount or greater, but you can also leave your estate planning, your structure a trust or estate so that it's left with the university as well. So it's definitely accessible.
It is doable. So we had a little bit of a script, guys, but Michael, you get to be the first one I go off script with. So we are among HBCU alum. We are in the family right now. So you know how we keep it on the inside and we don't go out of our house. Talk to me about this trust gap. Because here's the question I have people asking me: what do they do with it? How does it work? Where does it go? Who's doing what with it? And I try to explain that there are very, very, very strict rules around endowment management. And when Keon talks about the restrictions and the signing authorities and all that kind of stuff, it's real and it's true. So would you mind telling us a little bit more about it, since you manage a huge, big fund at Columbia?
Sure. I mean, so, with all money that comes into these endowments, they have lots of restrictions, controls, and procedures around what they could be invested in, how the money is to be used. So there should never be any kind of worries of, this money is going to be spent in ways that are not going to be, to your wishes. Usually when you put money into an endowment per se, you will actually elect how exactly you would like that money to benefit. So, I was in the School of Business. One thing I might think about one day is, making sure that the School of Business has some endowment money set aside, and really the income that's being generated off the principal amount.
Did you say one day? Did you say one day?
Oh,
I think
it's gonna
today
happen.
is the day.
It's happening. I'm already sending
You
checks. I'm
drunk the
sending
Kool-Aid. All
checks.
right, all
But
right.
you know, when we talking about, you know, the defined endowments, you do have tons of restrictions. The money is not going to frivolous activities. It is being used for the sole purpose that you designate when you put the money in. So there should be no concerns over you know, how it's being used, because you're going to define how it's going to be used.
That's right. Well, now let's get back to your question. What can we expect or hope that HBCU alumni can do to overcome this gap? That those bar charts that showed the HBCUs down here and then the PWIs over here, and those are just the top 10. It doesn't get a whole lot better when it goes down to the top 150 or the top 250. The disparities are just huge. So what do you think we ought to do in that regard, Mike? What's the message?
Well, you know, I think for us, it's all about, you know, just how we view the endowment and how we view our schools. And I think that we all have to take a responsibility as HBCU alum to do a couple of things. I think one, we all have to be ambassadors. There are HBCU alumni all across the globe. It's not just nationwide. I know I went to school with a lot of folks from even outside of the country. So we have ambassadors, or we need to make everyone an ambassador and take that responsibility to make sure that they're speaking up, you know, making sure that our school names are being brought up in conversation. You know, there's a lot of people out there that they never heard of HBCUs, or they don't think of them as options for their children or other children around them. So, you know, I think we need to be mindful of our responsibility to speak up about HBCUs for one. You know, I think two, it's about also, you know, from a local ground roots kind of situation, you know, we need to think about where we live, you know, where we're sending our kids to school. I've seen some real tragedies occur right in guidance counselors' offices, where guidance counselors are steering children of color to go to trade schools. You know, maybe it's to you know, not even go to college, think of other opportunities. And I think that that's just horrible. And you know, I think that we have to, you know, put it on ourselves as we look to, you know, where we reside, what schools we support. You know, when kids are matriculating, you know, through elementary and especially at the high school level, you know, where do we send our kids? You know, I actually have a very close rising scholar who happens to be an athlete that I know, a black great gentleman, and he is being recruited by a number of different schools and all types of schools, Ivies, HBCUs, and he's an athlete. And I kid you not, there was he's getting a lot of calls from recruiting, and his coaches will go on the calls with him. And there was a HBCU that wanted to have a call with him, and they asked if the coach would join the call, and the coach said that he would rather have his hands chopped off than to speak to an HBCU coach. So we have to do better. That's unacceptable, and that shows that you know, folks like me, I'm not doing well as an ambassador if people don't know about these HBCUs and they're not sending the kids, and they're not making sure that these kids know their best opportunities are out there. So you know,
I appreciate that story, and I will bet you when we open the floor for questions in just a few minutes, so get your questions ready. We'll hear a lot more of those. But now we're going to pivot to the positive. We're pivoting to the positive, Craig. So Hampton received its largest single gift of $30 million from the ex-wife of Jeff Bezos a few weeks ago. Morehouse made headlines. You said you got some connections to Morehouse with Mr. Smith doing a big thing down there a little bit ago. What impact do these two big, outrageous transformational investments in HBCUs make for others? What's the impact? What's going to happen in your mind's eye?
Right. Well, I think you know that best because you're going to get to spend it, right?
I don't get to spend it a penny, I can tell you.
But no, I was talking to a couple of friends over the weekend about these gifts and to HBCUs. I think what's happening, what you see happening, is just like what Mike was talking about with the athlete. There was a number one, I can't remember the gentleman's name, basketball athlete that just signed on to an HBCU, and that's starting a snowball effect where you're going to start seeing, and you've already started to see, these number one draft picks selecting HBCUs. And what that's going to have the impact of is just like the best in class athletes go to these top schools, and so everybody wants to play with them. Everybody wants to go to those schools. That's why those schools are good, right? Because they get the best athletes. There's no secret or surprise about it. So if you start getting these top athletes going to HBCUs, what's going to happen? The budgets of the HBCU, the sports programs are going to increase. The amount of advertising dollars and everything else, the TV contracts will go to HBCUs, where now you can only show the Grambling Southern game, on occasion. But so I think that's what happens when there's a light that's shown on HBCUs in any regard with these large gifts. Since Mackenzie Scott gave her gift, you've already seen the CEO and his wife of Netflix give a large gift.
Yep.
And then just last week, Bloomberg Foundation gave a large gift, and they seem to be going to some of the top ranked HBCUs. But I think that's the impact that it's going to have, and what it helps overall. What I think the benefit is, not only, of course, those large significant contributions certainly help the schools that get those contributions, but it helps us shine a light on the need of the universities. As large as those gifts are, and they're great, and I love to see them continue to come. And we certainly don't want to, by talking about endowments, get in the way of those gifts. And I think a number of those gifts are unrestricted. So I know you guys love those when you can get them. So, but it's not to take away from those kind of donations, because you want those too, but you also need endowment giving, because you need that long-term sustainable giving, or gifts that are help to the long-term sustainability of schools and long-term viabilities of
there, Craig, how I think you and I and Keon have talked about it the most. How many HBCUs have closed their doors in the last 20 years?
Right.
And the reason we're focusing on endowment giving is not just because somebody wants to have a big bucket to save money, right?
Right. That's right. Yeah, you need that kind of long-term capital to basically make the school viable. And as you saw from that slide that you showed, HBCUs are at a huge disadvantage compared to the PWIs, primarily white institutions, because they don't have that long-term capital that they can do long-term projects with, right? Not only give towards scholarships, but also research projects and a number of things that can be done with those kind of dollars. And then the one-time gifts, of course, they're one-time gifts. Now, it'd be great if Mackenzie Scott agreed to do that every year for the next 5 years.
Yeah.
But, who knows, she may have a bad meal and decide not to give next year. She may have, who knows, it's just subject to the whims of the person that's giving it. And the one-time gifts are just that.
I'm sorry, Craig, if I could pick up on that, and I want to take this to Keon.
Yeah.
We may say, I tend to try to pivot to the positive in just about every aspect of my life. So despite the fact that you don't have, $1 billion in your checking account, we have relationships. Keon, are HBCU leaders leveraging relationships to the benefit of the HBCUs? And if not, what would you say can be done?
You said, are HBCU leaders leveraging relationships? I say yes, absolutely. I mean, I think you have to, and the leaders of HBCUs know that, and you can see that in what Dr. Harvey does all the time. I mean, I've been able to, I worked in higher education for a long time, worked for a number of HBCUs as well. And, Hampton is one of the best managed endowments not endowments, organizations, where it's just very very diversified sort of like operation and well managed. And you don't do that without leveraging a number of key relationships to get that done. And so, yeah, I mean, so I think there are some.
I mean,
Mhm.
can we do better? I mean, I'd like to think that we can do more.
I was just saying, it really is key and dependent on the leadership. Because I was talking to someone else about another HBCU in Tennessee that just really had tough leadership. It really is dependent on the leadership and the board and oversight. It has to be right and has to be right people in plan in place.
All right, Lo, I want to ask you this question, and then Michael, you get to close us out. Lo, you're an alum of Hampton. If you had the bully pulpit for a day, a week, what would you say to your fellow alum in terms of encouraging them to act and invest?
It partially goes back to your comment about the success of the Obama campaign, like just thinking about the ability to aggregate micro donations. I believe that, to your point, a lot of individuals don't feel, they hear the headlines of the Robert Smiths of the world, or the McKinseys or the Reed Hastings of the world, and they feel that, certain alums might feel that, oh, well, I don't make that much to be able to contribute. And, really, if everyone were to make a commitment, en masse, then that would actually be extremely meaningful. So that's my first comment. And then my second comment is, just the ability, again, I look at these large institutions like the Yales, the Stanfords, the Harvards of the world. They literally do not need another dollar to be able to survive until the end of time. And yet there's certain dynamics in place that actually are also gap widening for our Black and brown brothers and sisters with regard to alums of those institutions feeling the pressure to make donations so that they can get into the favor for their kids to be able to gain admission. And what that typically means is, we're not in the position to be able to, we don't have that level of influence. Not many of us went to those institutions, and not many of us are able to make those types of donations. So, it's almost a double whammy, right? There's this near-term impact of, it probably means a seat taken away from someone that really deserves a seat that is Black or brown. Plus, again, these are dollars going to institutions that I would argue and have publicly said they don't need the money anymore. So I would really like to see those dollars from those, wealthy folks that are giving back to their organizations, or, doing something for the sake of vanity to get their name on a building or a professor's chair, to channel those dollars to the HBCUs.
Yep. Thank you, Lo. Very well said. You did well, Reverend Tony. Thank you so much. So, Michael,
I can preach now.
You can preach. I bet you can, my brother. And Travis, I see your hand, but we're going to get Mike to give us, and Craig, I'm going to get you both to answer this question for me. Mike, you though first. You said to me, and it's not on the flyer, guys, because remember, we in the house now. He said, we can't wait on white America to save our Black HBCUs. What did you mean by that?
Yeah, well, I think that what I meant by that is just this whole reliance is not, a position that we want to be in. I love my HBCU, and my HBCU taught me to be a leader and not a liability. So we need to really take this on our own. This is our house. We need to protect our own house. And it is, no disrespect to these lovely donations that are coming through, and let's keep them coming. We are really appreciative of that grace, but we cannot sit back and wait for that to be our lifeline forever. I think Craig mentioned this a little bit earlier. It could be that we can get a donation today, and then tomorrow they'll say, well, we'll give it to the next school or some other school or their own alma mater. These things are transformational, and but they're not permanent. And I think we are permanent. It is our, tell me one institution that was created for the benefit of Black people in a positive light, that has a 150-year track record. It's all about these HBCUs, and they're for us. We need to really harness them and take care of our home.
Brothers are preaching tonight, y'all. I'm glad we're recording, right? We just need the choir. So Craig, I want to come to you, and this will be our last question of the panelists, and then we'll go to the audience. It's said that smaller HBCUs lack investment teams that can effectively manage them to build and grow what they have. What kind of feedback or advice do you share with HBCUs around that point of view? Is that a valid point of view in your mind's eye, or is that something that we need to be cognizant of?
Yeah. I mean, that's not. I have a couple of points to make. That's not unique to as HBCUs. Any small institution is going to have, they may have, because they have a lack of resources and they can't have a large investment staff in house. It's not unusual for them to outsource that. And to use advisors for that. I mean, it could be a small public pension fund, mid-sized public pension fund. A lot of these organizations depend on outside advisors. That's why outside advisors exist. And then they can gradually, as they raise capital, raise endowments, raise more resources, they can start to bring some of those services in-house. But that's not unusual, and it shouldn't be something that should stop an investment.
But okay, you're probably going to go to the second part of what I was going to ask. What do you do? What is a smaller HBCU to do?
Yeah, well, I think what they do is, one of the things they can do is find a good outside advisor, to work with. Cambridge Associates, for example, provide some of those services. There are other outside advisors that can help smaller HBCUs to put together a plan and an investment strategy that I think would be acceptable to investors, because they have the expertise. They've been doing this for a long time. They have the history. And so that shouldn't be a reason for someone not to give to their alma mater. There are other organizations out there that we know of that, kind of serve as conduits, whether it be UNCF or Thurgood Marshall. But there are ways of doing it that I think should give confidence to the investor to be able to give to their alma mater. The other point I was going to make was that leadership is important. Like Robert Smith's gift, I think, was actually encouraged Mackenzie Scott because of the notoriety and the publicity he brought to the table. I think that helped. And I think that's why you see these other investments coming in as well. But to bring it down, to, like you said, to our level, it's going to take the leadership of alums to give, at smaller amounts, to allow us to go out and raise more capital, especially for endowments. Because when you go out to, whether it be corporations, whether it be high net worth individuals or others that don't have a natural affiliation with HBCUs, one of the first questions they're going to ask is, okay, what are your alumni doing? How is your alumni giving? Because if the folks that went there and benefited the most from the schools are not giving, why should I give? What's my relationship? So I think it's critically important. And I've worked with not necessarily HBCUs, but other institutions here in town that are primarily African-American and serving African-American.
And you're in St. Louis, correct?
Yeah, in St. Louis, serving African-American interests. And so we went out to the broader corporate community to raise capital for a capital campaign. And that was the first question they asked. Okay, what are the alums doing? Are they giving on a consistent basis? So that's why it's so critical for the alums to take leadership in this, even if they don't think they have a lot of resources, even if it's not going to make the paper, like a Mackenzie Scott or a Robert Smith donation. But I think it's critical that alums take leadership.
So as we go to, thank you so much, gents. I am so proud to see four brothers doing it big. And this is just so inspiring to me. You all are inspirational. The only thing you're missing is a system. So we're going to work on that next time.
Hey, I forgot. I have a niece that went to Hampton, graduated from the medical school. She married a doctor who graduated from the medical school.
Okay.
And a number of the alums that we invest in are actually HBCU. Uh, uh, a lot of the diverse fund managers we invest in are HBCU alums.
Yeah, and
So
I
I have a connection.
You drunk the Kool-Aid. You all up in there. We will give it to you, Craig. But so when you ask your question, try to keep your question as short and succinct as possible. So I'm going to lower your hand and ask you to unmute Travis so that you can ask your question.
Yes, good evening. Can you hear me?
Yes, yes, yes.
Yes. Travis Parker here, Howard University grad, 1989. I had to throw that in there. This is a great discussion. Great job, Felicia. And I'll jump right to my question or what have you, because I love to hear what the gentlemen have to say. One thing about it, I truly believe in order for us to be able to get this situation under control, definitely have to educate. I'm here on this call right here, and I've just learned so much about endowment, and then it has become important to me because of being educated by you all. So I guess one of my questions is, do you know of, or are we educating our graduates about endowment before they get off the campus? Is there a way that now can we I know when I went to Howard, because Blacks could not swim, I could not graduate Howard unless I took a swim class.
All right.
So since endowment is so important right now, why is it that we can't make a seminar or a workshop before you graduate, you are educated on endowment?
Well,
So
I guess you should say that, Travis, because I am using a chapter I'm working on my PhD, as you well know. And this is what spawned this conversation for me around HBCUs. But Booker T. Washington, the most famous graduate of Hampton University, when you read his book, Up From Slavery, I think that's the name of it, he is one of the first African-American real true major gifts fundraisers. And the principles in that book exist today. And I've committed that I'm going to help and present to whomever is interested in here for our orientation. At Hampton, we have orientation 101 class that all freshmen have to go through. To build that culture of philanthropy. That's the big thing that we don't have. But I'm going to ask all the other fellows to jump in and offer insights that you may have about the question that he's posed.
I think that's a great observation. I was mentioning to the group the other day when we were talking about this session that my son's high school here in St. Louis, that's what they did with all their students as they were the first 4 years of, well, hopefully the only 4 years of high school, but from the freshman year to their senior year, they required them to raise money and give to the school so that by the time they graduated, that was a habit. It was habitual. It was not something that they didn't know how to do. And I think you're right. I think we're missing a great opportunity and we're missing an opportunity not to train our students when they become alums to have already started to give. So it's not just training them to give after they leave, but actually training them while they're there to give something.
Yep.
So that they're used to giving by the time they graduate.
So Nasir, then Kimmy, but I want to ask Mike. You're at Columbia, one of those Ivies. What do they do with the students up there? Do you know?
Well, you'd be surprised, and not just specific to Columbia, but Ivy League. You have to remember how many people they graduate every year. I mean, there's like 30,000 students, and you could be graduating 5,000 a year. So there's a lot more people, and the giving rates are not exactly tremendous if you just look at the percentages. So
really? Okay.
While they're strong, they're not so different, but they just have a lot more people. And hey, we could talk about it all day, but the people that are graduating from Ivies are also getting different opportunities, and they might accumulate a lot more wealth. We don't have the same, so it's hard to even compare that.
It is true. All right, Nasir, great to see you, buddy. Unmute.
Sorry, can you hear me now?
Yes, yes.
So you too as well. Thank you for your leadership, and it's great to see many of you on this call. My question, literally building on top of Mike's point, historically, HBCUs have not been able to participate in the private markets. We've missed out on a lot of the opportunities to make investments into funds that are in turn making investments into these unicorns, right? And so I wonder how are, beginning with Hampton, for example, how are we leaning in to participate in the private markets, Michael? Is there lessons learned that your peers are sharing with HBCUs so we can co-invest as LPs into top tier funds that yield a substantial financial return? So that's where I'm curious. How are we proactively leaning in to participate in the private markets where historically we really have missed out on some pretty excellent investments from funds, but also direct investments low?
Well, I'm going to definitely have to defer part of that question to Keon because he's a lot closer to Hampton's portfolio.
Michael,
I mean, I definitely.
Can I do that? Can I defer to Keon since we just heard from you and we can hear his little soft voice?
Sure.
Great, thank you. And as I said, I've only been working with Hampton for 3 or 4 years now, and we've increased our investments in private markets over that time. You know, Low Tony can speak to that. You know, we've invested with diverse managers and other managers, but also focused on actually almost every private market investment we've made has had a leader that's also African American since I've been involved. But the main point I'm trying to make is that you know, there's been schools. I don't think you want to say that. I think there's been schools like Spelman that's been investing in private markets since 1980, and they've crushed it in that strategy. So I wouldn't put it all. And then if you have the average HBCU has 50 million in endowment, that's the fact. And so if you don't have, if that's what you have, you're probably not going to have a policy for private investments. That's just reality.
That's just it. Well, there you go. He carries a big stick and does not talk a lot. So.
Yeah, but I think the goal.
Well, I think one of the things that's interesting is that, to Keon's point, you look at Spelman, and Keon has told me this, it was the leadership of Spelman's investment committee that was able to really push to go into the private markets. You know, there's this gentleman named Swenson who led Yale's endowment for a number of years that basically put together the playbook of investing into the alternative asset class, and particularly into private equity or venture capital. And that really was the leading investment thesis and strategy, which catapulted not only Yale, but there's a, you know, just like in football or other sports, there's a coaching tree, there are trees in the investment world as well. So a lot of the Svensson disciples went on to these other endowments and implemented the same playbook. And fortunately, Spelman had someone that was familiar with that strategy and was able to implement that.
But Lo, that goes back to Travis's question about the strategy, somebody educated.
Yeah, that's right. But to Keon's point, you know, when you look at the amount of capital that's available within an HBCU endowment on average, it's, you know, it's really not enough to prudently invest across multiple asset classes to be able to have the right risk reward profile. So that is a challenge. And then I think your other point is the ability to be able to actually get into some of these top performing venture funds. And that's something that I've been working with another group of Black VCs on, which is to approach these large investment firms in venture capital where the data shows us that their returns persist over time. You know, there is no guarantee that the past performance will be indicative of future performance. However, the data does show that their performance does tend to persist. But there's a long line of people that want to get into these funds. So I've been working with some other Black VCs to work our networks to talk. And the good news is there's receptivity to the concept of these funds opening up their limited partner or investor base to take dollars from universities. I almost think from HBCUs, I almost think it has to also happen in coordination with some of the large philanthropic efforts of these folks that are making these donations, of kind of putting stipulations around them. So it's not just another building, but yet it actually goes into
some purpose. So we almost have to do a speed round. So Kimmy, You and
Yeah.
then Michael.
Yeah, I have two comments and a quick question. First of all, I want to say, Felicia, thank you for including me. She and I are working on a major project right now to endow a chair in the music department that will honor my grandfather and the collection that he has there at Hampton University. My next comment is, Wesley, tell Barbara she owes me a phone call. I'm her soror. My question is, where does life insurance play into this? Because as young folks are graduating, they are at the key time when they can get a $1 million policy pretty low that they can, I think, earmark to come to an HBCU. So where does life insurance play in this?
Which one of you guys want to take that planned giving type question? Any of you guys? Well, planned giving is within my toolkit. And a lot of these major institutions, that's how they got, the Ivy Leagues, that's how they got to where they are. 100 years ago, somebody says, when I pass on, my estate is going to this institution. We are not doing that at the same rate that others. And what I mean by we, the African-American community, to their HBCUs. One is because there's a knowledge or education gap, and two, there's some other structural things we have to overcome as I alluded to the trust gap. We need to talk more and have more understanding of what happens to a dollar when it's invested. And I use the term investment, invested in your HBCU. It's not frivolous. It is an important step. So Kimmy, I don't think any of the fellas want to take hold of that. So hopefully that answered. We will now go to Mr. Bird as we come on the 7 o'clock hour. Awesome conversation.
Hey, thank you. I got a question. Several people have mentioned Dr. Harvey. So from a standpoint of people that are working with Hampton or working with other HBCUs, what do you see as an attribute that Dr. Harvey has regarding philanthropic endeavors that you're not seeing at other HBCUs?
Yeah. For me, I could speak to that. I mean, he's fearless. He's a businessman. Before he came to Hampton, he understood you got to have some guts and courage to lead and make decisions that are not necessarily always popular, but have a long-term gain. But Keon, you work, you've spoken to this, so I didn't know if maybe you would weigh in.
No, I agree. I agree with everything you said. I think the key is leadership in any institution, and we've got great leadership at a number, but we got to keep it. You got to keep having strong leaders.
Yeah. And so honestly,
on that real quick, Felicia. Yeah, the leadership is key. And I mentioned to the team that I know the chairman of the board of Morehouse, and he is the one who got Robert Smith to the graduation. Didn't know what Robert Smith was going to do that day, but he was the key to getting him there. And I know personally that he's reaching out to the people that he knows that can get in touch with other high net worth individuals. He's focused on billionaires, but he's in
our camp, right, Craig? You told
us
about our little project, right?
That's right. So we need to share that model. We need to share what they're doing at Hampton and Morehouse, and share that to the other HBCUs, so that their leaders can start to do some of the same kinds of things.
And I think you said that Woody?
Willie Woods.
Willie Wood, that he was going to join our conversation, but
right.
wasn't able to make it.
Not able to join us today, right.
Thank you all. Gentlemen, I just cannot thank you enough, the panelists who have just been so tremendous. We're going to do this again. This was in the house. We're going to take this outside the house to corporations and foundations to share what a great investment an HBCU is. And we're going to demonstrate that. This has been an excellent conversation. Thank you all for joining. You will get more information when we do this again. We really appreciate it. Thank you all. Bye-bye.